have a rather gamma-irradiated selection of issues from today's 10 team-ups. Not initially though, as Nighthawk bonds with Spidey over their shared feelings of guilt over hurt, or in Spidey's case, murdered loved ones. Strangely, after the main story, we get a short solo backup feature starring Nighthawk, which, incidentally, is drawn by the one and only Steve Ditko. Both stories have Nighthawk coming to the aid of a blonde-haired, crippled female wearing a green dress. That wasn't done intentionally either. The editor should really have been on top of that. The next issue sees Doc Samson make an appearance. I've always quite liked Doc Samson, more than Marvel I think, as he has very rarely had his own title and he's never been on any super team's roster. So let's give him the spotlight for once. In a tale written by Mike Barr, who I'm not very familiar with pencils from Frank Springer, who I'm even less familiar with. It's a typical start to the day for Peter Parker, as he finds himself late for a conference at the Empire State University. The conference is about whether some new experimental gamma ray treatment can be used to treat the mentally ill. The guest speaker is, Doc Samson. How did you guess? He is trying to argue that this new treatment is completely safe, but arguing against him is his old sweetheart, Dr. Delia Childress. She says that although Doc Samson's arguments are very persuasive, she has an even more powerful argument against the treatment, and that argument is the Incredible Hulk. She has seen the Hulk in action, and most people are aware of the devastation that he leaves in his wake. And of course he is the product of gamma radiation. But Doc says no, the Hulk is a product of uncontrolled gamma radiation. And to prove that not everybody exposed to gamma radiation becomes some kind of mindless monster, he shows off his own prowess by lifting up the conference platform. However, things then start to get out of hand. In making his next point, Doc slams his fist down on the podium at which he's speaking, only to result in its complete destruction. Then he feels so weak he collapses, before again his strength floods back into him, and he pleads for the auditorium to be cleared. Everyone there is in danger, and we know that not just because Doc Samson has warned them to get out, but because Pete's spider sense is going off, and he thinks it's linked to whatever is going on in the theatre's projection booth. One quick change later, and he's investigating in the guise of the wondrous web-slinger. He finds the real projectionist tied up and replaced by a couple of bozos, one of whom is aiming some kind of ray at Doc Samson. They are quickly taken out of the picture, before a third baddie turns the tables on Spidey. On the next page we find out two things. Firstly, that ray device is designed to enhance radiation. The result of that would be to either amplify or reduce Doc Samson's strength. And as we've seen, it did both alternately. The other thing we learn is that Doc Samson is another member of the pipe-smoking heroes brigade. Whoever that third villain was, they have escaped, for the time being at least. Spider-Man also pulls a disappearing act, before Peter Parker arrives to ask Doc Samson if he would speak to his freshman class that afternoon. Doc Samson agrees to that date, before Delia agrees to a lunch date with him. Without their knowing, Peter Parker tags along, just to keep an eye on them, although the prices at the restaurant aren't exactly to his liking. During the date, we see that Delia had a very controlling father when she was growing up. We're also told that Doc Samson was very controlling in their relationship, although we don't see any evidence of this and she doesn't give any examples. We see that one day, after she was sick of her father not letting her do anything, she rode a motorbike behind his back, and it resulted in her crashing into a tree and crippling her leg. She says that Samson is still trying to control her and trying to prove that he is always right and she is always wrong. But it won't work anymore, and she storms out of the restaurant. If this is all about the motorbike business, then isn't her anger a bit misplaced? After all, Samson had nothing to do with that, and her dad told her not to ride the motorbike. But she did it. She insisted, and she rode it behind his back, and she crashed into a tree on her own. The only person she should be angry at is herself. As Doc goes to follow her, Peter Parker pops up and stops him, saying, "Let her go. Making a scene won't help anything." And Doc says, "Yes, I suppose you're right," when really what he should be saying is, "What the hell are you doing here? Are you following me?" Later on, we have a bit of an Indiana Jones moment, as Doc is giving that lecture to Pete's class, half of whom seem to be smitten with him. Again, though, he begins to lose control, as, bursting out of his academic's suit, he leaves the building via the roof as Doc Samson, superhero. Spidey reasons that someone as strong as Doc Samson probably doesn't need his help. I guess he's learned from his team-ups with Superman. But nonetheless, he swings on over to see if he can assist in any way. He discovers that Doc Samson has located the latest couple of henchmen that have been aiming this ray at him, and he shakes them out of the building in which they were hiding. Spidey then does a little bit of mopping up as they try to escape. The two heroes then try to work out who is behind this. After all, nobody knew that Doc Samson was going to be speaking to Peter Parker's class that afternoon. Spidey, however, thinks there was one person that knew, but before he has time to raise this with Doc, we discover the identity of that other mystery villain that was behind the scenes earlier. And he ain't pretty. Literally. It's the ever-ugly Rhino, and he's got a bone to pick with both Spider-Man and Doc Samson, after those two tangled in issue 218 of The Incredible Hulk. Samson is in trouble, because not only did he take the full force of the Rhino's charge, but again, someone is aiming that ray at him and is sapping his strength. That leaves Spidey and the Rhino to dance, just like old times, before we discover the identity of the latest person to hold that ray gun. Of course, it's Delia. She clobbers a weakened Doc Samson, whilst the Rhino does a number on Spidey. That knocks Spider-Man out, but the villains assume he's dead. No reason to check a pulse or anything, is there? Later on, Doc Samson comes to, and we get some answers. Delia's bitterness has driven her to work for AIM. She's been publicly discouraging and arguing against gamma research, so that AIM will be the only organisation using it. Now, Doc is strapped to a mind probe that will reveal the secret of how he got his powers, so that AIM can use that for their own ends. He feels the layers of his memory being peeled back to the time when he was transformed from frail, pipe-smoking psychiatrist to powerful, pipe-smoking superhero. It won't surprise you to hear that Spider-Man has recovered after rolling with the blow from the Rhino. But how is he going to find Doc Samson? Simple. He knows that Doc's body is loaded with gamma radiation. So all he needs to do, back at the lab, is put together a gamma energy tracer from a few spare parts lying around. The boy's a genius. It leads him to Central Park and a concealed air vent. That opens to an abandoned subway tunnel underneath New York. Is that true? Is there genuinely an abandoned subway tunnel underneath New York? We've got a few abandoned parts of the underground system in London, but this looks like it's on a completely different scale. He finds where Doc is being held, and it is then simply a case of pulling the plug on the mind probe. This naturally gets the attention of everybody present, and that gives us a good old-fashioned slugfest. Look at that. Action-packed. This is made all the more interesting after Doc has marshalled his strength and joins the fray. Doc Samson then really shows his strength off, as he plays with the Rhino in a way I've never seen anyone do before. Then, as Delilah is about to take her own life by electrocuting herself to death, wouldn't be my first choice, Doc leaps in, takes the cable from her and saves her life. So this is weird. For 2 issues in a row now, we've had a guest star targeted by a former lover, now crippled by an accident and turned evil because she blames him for the accident. He then saves her life and carries her off at the end. Both tales are by totally different writers, but the editor should really have been on top of that. In issue 103, Spidey teams up with Ant-Man as they face off against Taskmaster, a villain who had returned seeking vengeance in issue 146, the review of which is included in this episode. It's actually a really good issue, more like an issue of Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man than Marvel Team Up, as we get a view into the civilian lives of both Peter Parker, a rarity in this series, and Scott Lang. Issue 104 is another rare issue which doesn't feature Spider-Man, nor does it star the Human Torch. Well, if it doesn't feature either of those two, then there's only one other character that could headline an issue of Marvel Team Up, apart from Aunt May, I suppose. And it is the Incredible Hulk. The Hulk's phenomenally successful TV show was still in full swing at this point, and he had featured in the previous 2 years' Marvel Team Up annuals. So I guess it's no surprise that he was seen as enough of a draw to headline the main title for a couple of issues. A couple? Oh yes, as you will see. In this issue, he is paired up with the most successful Tarzan ripoff, Kazar. It's an Al Milgrom cover, but within it is Jerry Bingham in charge of art duties. He was a bit of a journeyman artist, working on a variety of issues for a variety of publishers, from the 70s to the 90s, when he moved away from the comic book industry and turned his talents to movies and other fields of art design. The writer for this issue is also not particularly well known. Roger Mackenzie, starting in comics about the same time as Jerry Bingham, wrote mostly for Daredevil and Captain America, but even more so for Battlestar Galactica. But beyond that, again, he was a bit of a journeyman. So, is the Hulk going to justify his lead role? Yeah, I think so. This issue has a great first page, as we have an image of Kazar leaping down from the trees onto the back of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. So what do you reckon? Kazar better than Tarzan? Obviously Tarzan is far more famous, but Kazar lives in a land surrounded by dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals. That said, there were plenty of times in the Tarzan comics when he came across unusual creatures, including the occasional dinosaur, and also tiny people. For some reason, those comics were obsessed with tiny people. The great beginning continues as Kazar actually defeats that T-Rex. Defeats a Tyrannosaurus Rex, single-handed, with a knife. It's as Kazar is wallowing in the glory of this victory that outsiders appear, armed with guns. The cheats. Of course, despite this technological advantage, Kazar prevails. Although one of the men, lamenting that after searching the Antarctic for months for the Savage Land, he hasn't had the time to radio their position back to the chairman. So he decides to throw a homing beacon in the nearby lake instead. And we have some nice panels showing that beacon sink to the bottom of the lake. Shortly after this, the outsiders are fully driven away, but one of them, as they leave, swears that they'll be back. I've got a funny feeling that we are leaving the Savage Land too. Ah, here we are, San Francisco. The Hulk stands atop the Golden Gate Bridge, with a young girl in his arm and a hostile chopper hovering nearby. Far below them, we see that police have stopped the traffic. What a brilliantly composed panel, really setting the scene and giving us all the context that we need. One of the cops, Captain Taggart, approaches the Hulk and tries to persuade him to let the little girl go. But the Hulk says she's his friend. However, the girl is quite content to leave him. And so, tentatively, with the girl clinging onto his neck, Captain Taggart makes his way along one of the broad cables of the bridge. We are told, rather understandably, that it is a perilous, nerve-wracking descent. Captain Taggart is praying his next step, you've said it already, haven't you, won't be his last. With the girl safe, the authorities open fire on the Hulk, and he, to avoid the annoyance of their bullets, fully dives into the river. So who's the girl? Man, we're in some desperate need of some backstory there, aren't we? Neither we nor the Hulk see her again. And a couple of days later, Bruce Banner finds himself in a Salvation Army homeless shelter, where he crosses paths with an old sailor. I forgive him the pipe because he's a sailor. He was due to set sail on a ship the next morning. However, he's decided to stay in San Fran and offers Bruce the opportunity of taking his place. With no ties to hold him back, Bruce agrees. He is just one of several waifs and strays that have joined this crew, and it isn't long before the existing rough and ready crew members tell us that that whole ship is overseen by none other than the chairman. I wonder where that ship's headed. Anyway, Bruce takes to his new life. He enjoys the routine, forges new friendships, and nothing gets him angry. After several weeks out, he discovers that some parts of the ship aren't free for everybody to access, and the crew are determined that that rule will not be broken. That same night, one of his new friends on board, Scott, tells him that the ship should be heading west. However, he can see from the position of the stars that all this time it's actually been headed south. Bruce tells him about the restricted area, and the pair of them decide they want answers. Forcing their way through the locked door, they discover tons of high-tech hardware, along with the chairman himself. And it seems it should have been pronounced chairman because it is MODOK. MODOK has met the Hulk before, and he knows that he is Bruce Banner. So, to avoid any complications, he insists on the Doctor being kept sedated. When next we see the crew, they are in the Savage Land. It seems that the new crew members are going to be used as bait to lure the dinosaurs out of the jungles of the Savage Land, where MODOK's men will then put them to sleep with gas. They'll then be loaded onto the ship, and MODOK will use them to change the face of the earth, as he puts it. However, the sight of rising plumes of gas does not escape the attention of the Savage Land's protector. MODOK's plan seems to be going successfully until he makes a fatal error, and that is by uttering the words, "Nothing can stop me now." Right on cue, Kazar and his saber-toothed tiger, Zabu, appear to test MODOK's claim. However, the gas that can bring down a herd of dinosaurs easily does the same to Kazar. When Kazar regains consciousness, he finds himself and Zabu thrown into the cargo hold of the ship, along with numerous dinosaurs and a chained-up Bruce Banner. MODOK explains that the same process that transformed him into the creature he is today will be used to transform those dinosaurs into an unstoppable army that is his to command. All of these surroundings, the presence of MODOK, of the dinosaurs, and the sight of a chained-up Kazar begin to affect Dr. Bruce Banner. Despite being drugged, sedated, his heart races, his pulse pounds, and the Incredible Hulk is with us once more. Everyone loves that bit in Conan the Barbarian, don't they, when he punches the camel? Well, the Hulk goes at least one better, and decks a dinosaur. Briefly, in his mindless rage, the Hulk turns on Kazar, who quickly tricks the Hulk into breaking his chains. Soon after that, he explains to the Hulk that they have a common enemy, the dinosaurs that are eyeing them up as a snack. There is a very brief one-panel reference to the Hulk's former love, Jarella, classic storyline, before it all kicks off. The Hulk fighting a herd of dinosaurs. My life is complete. MODOK is hoping to use the cannon that releases the gas to sedate our two heroes. But the Hulk gets between him and the weapon. He also, rather brilliantly, refers to MODOK as Big Head. MODOK is clearly offended by this, and the two of them battle it out. MODOK with his headband, and the Hulk with anything he can lay his hands on. Eventually, it seems that MODOK is victorious, as after downing the Hulk, he says, "MODOK is supreme." But emerging from the wreckage, Hulk says, "And Hulk is Hulk." The best lines are often the simplest, aren't they? But there's more great dialogue to come, because now MODOK, who has been freed from his armoured floating chair, tries and fails to repulse the Hulk. And the Hulk says to the oh-so-superior MODOK. Big Head captures Hulk, tries to kill Hulk, then wants Hulk to leave him alone. Big Head is dumber than Hulk. As the Hulk approaches him, even Zabu seems to be getting in on the action, before Kazar calls a halt to things, saying that life is precious and not to be taken without just cause. MODOK, now sedated with his own gas, is loaded back onto the ship. Kazar offers the Hulk sanctuary in the Savage Land. But Hulk says no, he just wants peace, and leaps away. The ending feels rather rushed, but make no mistake, this is a good comic. It's got action, adventure, good art, some good lines, and the Savage Land. Now this is odd, not just because the Hulk remains as the star for the next issue, but because the creative team have totally changed. Actually, not totally changed, because Mike Esposito is again providing the inks. But this entire batch of 10 issues suffers from a complete lack of continuity where the creative teams are concerned. We have no fewer than 7 different writers working on these 10 issues, and, although not quite as bad, 5 different pencilers. This issue sees a one-off shift from legendary artist Carmine Infantino, a man known for creating several Silver Age characters for the Distinguished Competition, the best known of which was that era's version of The Flash. Mike Barr is back writing again, and after the Hulk and Power Man and Iron Fist all featured in the previous year's Marvel Team Up Annual, let's see how the reunion went. There's no messing around here, as in the very first panel our heroes meet. Luke Cage and Danny Rand are in a private plane on the trail of a couple of hoodlums. But as they fly over an anonymous desert in the American Southwest, they encounter the Jade Giant. The Hulk reasons that people in planes are always chasing after him, so he gets in first and punches the plane out of the sky. The plane crash lands, but even in the desert there can be eyes around, and opportunists. The crash is seen by a family scratching out an existence in the desert and desperate for water. The Pa of the family says that if nobody survives that crash, then they can take all of their water. To which one of his kids says, "But Pa, what if they need their water for themselves?" What, when they're dead? Fortunately, neither Luke nor Danny nor their pilot Carol have died, although Danny is unconscious. Unfortunately though, the door of the plane is now jammed shut due to the crash. So Luke overachieves and throws the plane clear of the 3 of them. This is seen by the family who, with very little contact with the outside world, assume that they have just seen the Hulk in action. To which Luke responds with a, "Oh, Christmas." I hate his Christmas curse. It's up there with "Oh My Stars and Garters" from Hank McCoy and pretty much anything that Doctor Strange says. Pa shoots him, to obviously no effect, and Luke insists to him, "I'm not the Hulk." But, quite amusingly, Pa continues to call him the Hulk for the rest of this comic. His bullets having no effect on Power Man, he points the gun at Carol and says unless Luke does what he says, Carol is going to get it. He's got a job for Power Man, and so, for Carol's sake, Luke goes along with it, leaving behind an unconscious Danny. It turns out all Pa wants Luke to do is to shift a massive boulder that is currently blocking their water supply. However, judging by the look of it, Luke isn't confident that he's up to the job. Meanwhile, Danny has regained consciousness, and after a quick costume change and a bit of meditation, he feels refreshed, which is handy, because he also crossed paths once more with the Hulk. Iron Fist tries his usual moves on the Hulk, to predictably no effect. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and so he begins to power up both of his fists. I didn't know he could do that. I thought it was purely a one-fist trick. Anyway, there is an unexpected side effect of his 2 glowing fists, as the shimmering hands seem to mesmerise and calm the Hulk, reverting him back to Bruce Banner. As Iron Fist and Bruce Banner wander off to find Iron Fist's partner and friend, Power Man, we see that his concerns about the boulder were correct. He can't move it. While he regains his strength, Pa's youngest child brings him some water. But when Pa sees him drinking the water, he jumps to a conclusion and saying, "This'll learn you to steal our water, Hulk," whilst attacking him with his stick, which is surprisingly effective. This is where Iron Fist and Bruce stumble onto the scene, and Bruce, seeing what's unfolding below him, loses his temper, becomes angry, turns into the Hulk, and then the Hulk, hearing Pa thinking that he's attacking the Hulk, decides to attack Pa. Of course, the Hulk would flatten Pa into a paste, so Iron Fist intervenes to stop him. He too is outgunned, so Power Man joins in too. They basically spend all their energies avoiding the blows of the Hulk. And as we are told that each would give up their life for the other because they are friends, the Hulk picks up a large boulder, and this gives Luke an idea. With shards of rock flying everywhere, the two of them manoeuvre the Hulk over to the boulder that's blocking the water source. We are told they do this without even having to exchange words, because they are more than just experienced warriors. They are friends. Why do they keep going on about them being friends? What point are they trying to prove? Eventually, they do manage to get him to smash the rock that's blocking the water source. But, realising he's been tricked, this makes the Hulk even angrier, and he now says it's going to kill them for making him look dumb. Oh, chill out. Then, as Power Man and Iron Fist contemplate hand-to-hand combat with the brutish Behemoth, Luke says, well, at least he's forgotten about the old man. Unfortunately, at that point, the Hulk hears the old man asking for his gun, and that sends him back to the top of the Hulk's hit list. But this is a Hulk story, so who turns up next? It's the army. Now, as the Hulk is trying to decide who to attack first, whether it be the army, Power Man and Iron Fist, or the old man decides to have another pop at shooting him. When his youngest daughter tries to stop him, saying that all the Hulk wants is a friend, the old man tells her to mind her place and hits her. The Hulk feels like giving Pa a taste of his own medicine, but Power Man is there first. Power Man tells the Hulk that he has hit the old man for him, so now the Hulk is really confused. Can I just say, I do hope this story doesn't end with something about friendship. One thing's for sure, the army and the Hulk aren't friends, and he wastes no time in leaving the scene. He says, Hulk is tired of fighting, always fighting. Hulk fights everyone. Fistman's friend, soldier friends, everyone has friend. Everyone but Hulk. And then it says something about a sound coming from the Hulk's throat. A sound that might be a sob. What, he's crying because he hasn't got a friend? What a wimp. Not even the Hulk's strength can find him a friend. Oh my God. They did it, didn't they? They actually ended... Oh, now hold on. There's one more page. With the Hulk gone, the army leaves. Not only that, but the young girl decides to go back to New York with Power Man and Iron Fist. Iron Fist says he hopes that the Hulk can break the circle of hate. And Power Man replies with, amen to that. Friend. Then, much like the Nighthawk issue, we have an extra 5-page story focusing purely on Power Man and Iron Fist, in which our heroes attend a fashion show. We get a bizarre asterisk that refers back to something else that happened in this same issue. The fashion show models try to rob the audience. One of the models gives up far too easily. Another two are stopped by a display dummy that's thrown by Iron Fist. And the last is literally beaten up by a girl. And it finishes with literally one of the most cliched lines ever, surely even for 1981, in which Misty Knight says that she thinks the little girl is going to get along just fine. Oh, please. 106 sees Spider-Man joined by the Star-Spangled Avenger to fight a giant runner beam. It's actually a pretty good issue. But, notwithstanding the scorpion, it isn't in keeping with our green theme. So let's move on to issue 107, featuring the Jade Giantess. The cover says, if you like action-packed scenes like this one, buy this book, because there are 163 more pulsating panels on the inside. Now, I don't know what's sadder, the fact that somebody at Marvel actually counted all those panels, or the fact that I did too, twice, just to make sure. And they miscounted. There are actually only 153. She-Hulk had only made her debut the year before in issue 1 of her own series, 1980's The Savage She-Hulk. As such, she was still a relatively new character, and, as such, a helping hand by co-starring with the Wallcrawler could only help to establish her. Tom DeFalco and Jim Shooter form their own team up to co-write this one, whilst the penciler is Herb Trimpe, who, with this issue, begins a year-long run on the title that lasts until Kerry Gamble takes over with issue 119. Peter Parker is performing his role of Shutterbug for the Daily Bugle outside the Federal District Courthouse, where Marvel's other lawyer, Jennifer Walters, is representing a new client. Leftist, underground, revolutionary leader, Hildy Dawes. I guess Hildy was a leftist, underground revolutionary, but she was also what we used to call a women's libber. But she took her cause to extremes, and she has now decided to hand herself in for the crimes she committed in the name of that cause. Being at a courthouse, we do also get a cameo from Matt Murdock himself, without his red suit, before we are then brought up to speed on exactly how it was that Hildy decided to hand herself in and came to Jennifer Walters for help. Now, this Jennifer Walters, as you can see, isn't yet green. At this point, she could change into the She-Hulk at will. This was the original, I suppose, iteration of She-Hulk before John Byrne put a bit of polish on the character and transformed her into the more modern-day version. However, at least one person clearly doesn't want Hildy to hand herself in, because as they ascend the steps of the courthouse, an uninvited visitor makes a very dramatic entrance. As it opens fire on the bystanders, one of them says, "Holy spit, I thought it was a publicity stunt for the next George Lucas film." Marvel used to love using that, the old "it must be a publicity stunt" approach from the general public. Jennifer Walters here makes a very unsound leap of logic when, as Hildy says, it must be her enemies seeking revenge, trying to kill her. Jennifer says, "I doubt it. There are easier ways to kill you. I think they're here to kidnap you," despite the fact that in the previous panel they only just managed to dodge a laser blast from the intruder. Jen is trying to avoid turning into She-Hulk to protect her secret identity, but she doesn't have to worry, because there's somebody else there that we've forgotten about. Whilst Peter Parker scales a nearby building to change clothes and set up his camera, the armoured vehicle lands, and out of it emerges an all-female crew, including the best supervillain spawned by the women's lib movement, Man-Killer. We last saw her all the way back in issue 8 of Marvel Team Up, when Spidey teamed up with the best superhero spawned by the women's lib movement, the Cat. We look at that issue in more depth, and indeed the character of the Cat in a lot more depth, in part 1 on my series about Tigra. And depending on when you're watching this video, that series may not even exist yet. But if it does, then there's a link in the corner. This group of women are there to rescue, in their eyes, Hildy Dawes. Not that she wants to be rescued by them. And Man-Killer says that no man can withstand her power and her fury. Well, there's one that might. And Man-Killer hasn't forgotten him since their last encounter. They have a good little action-packed fight, in which Spidey seems to do all the talking, until Man-Killer puts a stop to his chatter. Spidey takes this opportunity, whilst he's laying down, of sticking a spider tracer on Man-Killer's vehicle. Battle is recommenced spectacularly as Man-Killer hurls a truck in his direction, but to avoid it, Spidey thinks, well, I'll just bounce off of this nearby car roof. It doesn't go well. It's quite amusing to see Jen throughout this, because of course she's a lawyer. She's pretending to be a normal human lawyer, But we know that she is also a superhero. So she knows all this, she's done all this stuff. And she can't believe what she's seeing. She really isn't impressed with Spider-Man, saying, "That jerk, that yo-yo." With him out of the picture, Man-Killer takes the opportunity to grab Hildy. That's it. Jen realises she's going to have to change into She-Hulk. But before she gets the opportunity, she is knocked out by one of Man-Killer's goons. Then they carry Hildy away and leave the scene. This is not a good day for Spidey, because not only has he let the baddies get away with Hildy, but as he prizes himself out of that car, his picture is snapped by none other than his former rival at the Globe, Lance Bannon. Then, to really rub salt in the wounds, Jen begins to give him some stick, which he doesn't hang around for. He says he's going to find Hildy, and he refers to Jen as Dollface. This is not the issue for that kind of talk, sexist pig. It turns out Man-Killer, as always, wants to bring down what she calls the male-dominated system. I guess the word patriarchy wasn't in wide use back then. She wants Hildy to join her cause to give it some credibility. She isn't asking her, she's telling her. Then something incredible happens. Incredible for a Marvel team-up issue. We get to see even more of Peter Parker's supporting cast. We see Glory Grant and Jolly Jonah Jameson, who announces to Peter that Lance Bannon is joining the Bugle's staff. That's a pretty significant moment, Lance Bannon joining the Bugle, and it happens here, in the pages of a Marvel team-up. Actually, there's a lot going on in just these 2 pages. After that diversion to the Daily Bugle, Jen is trying to work out where Man-Killer's base could be. Man-Killer herself reveals that she has basically got a bomb on wheels that she is going to drive to her next target. Before Peter changes into his Spider-Man outfit, and Jen, who lucked out on finding one of Man-Killer's bases, literally changes into She-Hulk. There's a bit of a one-sided fight between her and Manny's goons before Spider-Man, having followed the Spider Tracer's signal, arrives on the scene. It always amazes me when we see 2 very well-known established characters meet for the very first time. And that happens here, as Spider-Man says, "Who the heck is that?" He may not know who she is, but she definitely knows him, and she isn't impressed. What do you think? A fight based on a misunderstanding? It's tradition. Don't get me wrong, she doesn't think he's an enemy. She just has a complete lack of respect for him. And he, fearing that she may be as dangerous as the Hulk, doesn't want to take any chances. There's some great banter between the 2. The high point of which is Spidey saying, "I've proven who's faster, now let's see who's stronger," and discovering the answer. Realising what a waste of time this all is, Spidey ends it by webbing Jen to the floor and apologising. He says he thought she was dangerous and overreacted, and they should stop fighting and team up. Jen agrees and shows she's not someone to be messed with by pulling herself out of Spidey's webbing. Before Spider-Man showed up, She-Hulk managed to get some good information out of those goons, and she now knows where Man-Killer is driving that bomb to. It's to a VIP club on the other side of town, where tonight they're holding a special ceremony where they're going to give the Outstanding Citizenship Award to none other than J. Jonah Jameson. It's time for the main event, as She-Hulk takes on Man-Killer, whilst Spidey deals with those other goons. Man-Killer says that She-Hulk is a traitor to her sex, and she should join Man-Killer's cause, to which She-Hulk responds, "I wouldn't join you if you were falling apart." This book is full of really good dialogue like that. Now the fight bursts into the main auditorium at just the wrong time. The wrong time for Jameson, that is, but the right time for us. It's great seeing his big moment spoilt by the person he hates the most in the world, even if he is there to indirectly save his life. Spidey's spider sense points him in the direction of the bomb, and She-Hulk punches a shortcut for them. She then picks up the truck and throws it out of harm's way into the East River. With our 2 heroes distracted by the bomb, Man-Killer is about to make her escape. But Hildy sees this as her opportunity for redemption. And in an attempt to atone for her past crimes, she grabs some high-tension electrical wires and grabs a hold of Man-Killer, killing them both. It's a really well-written comic, but wow, that's a heavy ending. The next 2 issues both feature Paladin, a character who incidentally was also created by the aforementioned Carmine Infantino. I've never really been into gun-toting characters. Even the Punisher is okay. Paladin was created a couple of years after Frank Castle, in 1978, but a good decade or so before the craze for armed heroes, anti-heroes, bounty hunters and the like really took off. Although he is in both issues 108 and 109, Paladin doesn't get his name on both covers. That is because the official co-star of issue 109 is Dazzler. She is a much more interesting character, but we don't have time to look at her today. Maybe I'll study her properly in the future at some point. Which brings us to our last issue for today, issue 110, featuring Iron Man, who, as you should know by now, always looks good on covers. I've actually reviewed this issue before, when I was looking at Spider-Man's first intertitle crossover, so check that out for an in-depth look at what the Webhead and Shellhead have in store for us. Is that a bit of an anticlimactic ending? I can't help it, I've covered it already.